Incoming Tekking Tumblein! Greetings, everyone! I am the great hero Tekking101, and today is a new episode of Geography is Everything-in, and this is my friend. He is a praying mantis-in named Nathan-in. Okay, so, just for sanity's sake, I probably won't be talking like Heracles in the entire video but you have to understand, I love this character. I love how he looks, I love how he talks, I love what he's all about, and we also just found out about his extended backstory in the latest Vivra card. I love you, Oda, and that's the whole reason I'm doing this right now, so do not take this away from me. Are you too excited, Nathan? You know, remember that story I told about the, when I was a little kid, I was walking up my street, and I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, and I saw this giant praying mantis in the middle of the road, and my first instinct as a little kid was just to run up and kick the thing, and it just, like, you kick it, and you heard an audible, like, because this praying mantis was huge. It was honestly even probably bigger than this one, and it just whizzed over the horizon, just phew! And everyone's like, Tekking, you horrible monster. Is like, hey, that praying mantis was like the colossal titan to all those little insects in that one garden. And I saved everybody. I saved all those insects. I slayed the destroyer, you know? So don't be looking at me and calling me the monster, okay? But anyway, yes, the BOIN Archipelago, or the BOIN Islands, and depending on the translation if you're watching the sub or the dubbin. Alright. Or, hey, if you're a biologist or a botanist, or I guess botanists could be considered biologists. No, botanists are biologists, right? I think I just offended my whole botanist fan base. You know, it's like, damn you, Tekking, I went to botany school for 5 years and you're not gonna call me a bona fide biologist? I'm like, okay, you're a biologist. If you want to use the official, like, taxonomy, like the scientific name, it's stomach barren, because much like how, for some reason, archipelagos, Oda does not depict them as actual archipelagos. Archipelagos are groups of islands, and the archipelagos that we get in One Piece both are not that. They are plants. The Sabaody Archipelago are not islands. They're a group of trees that are all just smashed together, and the BOIN Archipelago are a bunch of carnivorous plants that are all just around the same part of the ocean, right? So, not islands, but, you know, from a distance, if you're traveling towards them, yeah, they do look like islands. But no, yeah, they are carnivorous plants that will eat you. You might as well just tack a giant sign that says, carnivorous plant and giant flying insect islandin', keep out if you're into Vorin, because if you're into Vorin, then this is the fetishin islandin' for you. Alright, so, this was the place Usopp got sent by Kuma. And you really gotta give Kuma some credit, man. I mean, that bear dude had to come up with an idea for where he was gonna send each of the Straw Hats on very short notice. Alright, now, some of them were easy, like sending Zoro off to Mihawk's Island. You know, okay, he's a swordsman, he's gonna learn more about swordsmanship from Mihawk. I'm gonna send Nami the Navigator to the Weather Island. That makes sense, but with Usopp, you think Kuma was like, okay, where am I gonna send the Sniper King to? You know, he has a slingshot, he fires off, like, exploding bullets and things, like, the giant carnivorous plant island, I'm sure you'll find something there that you can make work in your arsenal, sends them off in that direction. And actually, though, it was rather fortunate, because Usopp, I mean, look at the islands. I mean, there's more than one. He could have landed on one of those stomach barren that Heraclean was not on, and Usopp could have been devoured almost immediately. But no, he lands very close to the Forest of Greenstone, or Glinston in the English dub, and this is the Forest of Swindlers. So, each island, each plant, kind of has like a jungle inside of it, but the jungle is divided into different sections or different forests. So the only two that we saw so far, and I'm assuming that even like each of those different flowers might have variations of that same kind of forest, because remember, this is like the perfect example that like natural selection and evolution exists in One Piece, because these islands are just like, okay, alright, we're gonna evolve to the point where we can devour like sea kings and stuff. This is like grand line evolution. They aren't dicking around with this, alright? This is overkill evolution, alright? So, the one swindling forest that Usopp falls in, right? That's just a place where everything will try to digest you, alright? It's like you go over to pick a fruit to eat it, and the fruit is actually a giant plant with teeth that'll come and attack you, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna go over here and sniff these flowers, and then the flowers have, like, giant tongues that reach out and try to, like, you know, digest you, and then it's like, oh my god, that's horrible, and you go over to a tree, and you're like, just gonna hang out behind this tree, and then the tree is alive, and the tree will try to eat you, and you're like, alright, I'm just gonna stand in the middle of this field And it turns out the grass, like, begins to undulate and, like, you know, tries to suck you in or something and just covers you in digestive juice. I'm like, I don't want to be here anymore. All right, that's the swindling forest. Not fun. Now, they're not all horrible abominations upon plant kind. No, there's also the gluttony forest, okay, which was the place that Heracleson takes Usopp in to get some food, all right? And this place is actually pretty chill. You got spaghetti plants, you got ham fruitsin, chocolate rocksin, and pizza bushes, and I don't know, but, you know, it's cool because you don't have to go to the store. I mean, of all the places to be cast away at, Heracleson was stuck on this island for like 24, 25 years, something like that. At least he had a good selection of food. It wasn't like you were stuck on an island where all you had was coconuts. You know, he could literally just go over to a tree and pick off some ham, make himself a sandwich that night. You know, I'm sure there was like a condiment tree he could go over and get some mustard and some ketchup if he wanted it. In the anime, he literally just like rips like a seed pod out of the ground and just pops it open, and there's some rice and curry in there. So why wouldn't you, right? Chocolate grows out of the ground in this place. That's pretty cool, right? Now, Usopp thought it was pretty cool too, except he doesn't have as much of a control as Heracleson does, and so Usopp eats way too much, and he ends up becoming, you know, morbidly obese. That's comedy, isn't it? Actually, when I first saw that, when I was reading the Straw Hat Separation serial, and we see Usopp as huge, honestly, that was probably the first cue up for me that there was gonna be a time skip. I know it's weird, and I mean, this is the One Piece world where Luffy devours all this food in one night and then he just works it off really fast and then he's back to normal. But for whatever reason, that really bothered me, seeing Usopp get that fat. And like, okay, how is Usopp gonna drop like 300 pounds in like a matter of weeks to get back to the Straw Hat crew? That honestly did start to cue me up, like there might be a time skip, and then Usopp slims down over the course of that time skip. And that ended up being what actually happened, okay? That's not like super, like, you know, it requires a bunch of foresight. There were plenty of people that thought that the, you know, time skip was gonna happen before it was really, you know, expressly shown in the manga. But that was one of the things that, you know, okay, that's a little weird. So, yeah. Now, Heracleson's backstory. I talked about this in the Viva Ricard, but just to kind of go over it again really quickly. So Heracleson is from the South Blue, and he was a botanist, and that's what he loved. He just loved to study exotic plants and, you know, learned all about that kind of stuff. And he had a group of fellow botanists that decided to travel to the Grand Line to discover a new plant species. And I mentioned that in the Viva Ricard video, but I just find that fascinating. You know, pirates and revolutionaries and the Marines are not like the only factions that go into the Grand Line. The Grand Line, for much of the world, is this mysterious land that hasn't really been explored entirely. I mean, yeah, there are islands that are populated in the Grand Line. It's like we know nothing about it, but it's very dangerous, and it's like pretty much stated like, you know, if you're born there, you're born there. You're kind of stuck on whatever island you're on, but to be born outside the Grand Line and take the journey into it, that's just a bunch of risks just getting into the Grand Line itself, and then when you're in there, you really got to know what the hell you're doing. That's why only, like, the pirates and the revolutionaries and all those groups that have, like, a big goal in mind, like, we're gonna go find the One Piece, or we're gonna go put an end to the Tenryubito system. You know, it makes sense for them to go in and risk it all. But there are other groups of people that would like to travel there just to learn about the world. You know, so that was Heracleson's group. I can imagine Heracleson, you know, learning about plants and everything in the South Blue, and maybe he went to like he was from an island where there was like a university that studied like biology and stuff, and he got a bunch of his colleagues together, and he was like, let's do this. Let's gain up enough money, and let's fund a expedition into the Grand Line to study foreign, you know, flora, and, you know, like how this actually works in that kind of environment, because they've heard all the stories, probably. They heard all the stories about the crazy weather and the giant sea monsters that exist in the Grand Line and all these different island climates. That's probably piquing their interest of what kind of plants would really grow in that kind of environment, how they would evolve to survive in those extremes. So that probably got them excited. And so they, saved up enough money and got on a ship, and I'm not sure if they went through Reverse Mountain or if they sailed directly through the Calm Belt. I'm not exactly sure how they got in there. Considering this isn't a pirate ship we're talking about, maybe the Marines might have helped them out, and they might have gotten some propelled ship to go through the Calm Belt. I'm not sure, but at any rate, they reached the BOIN Islands, and they got there, and it was most likely that botanist group, or Heraclean maybe just himself, that gave it the name, the BOIN Archipelago, or named the plant Stomach Baron. That's the one who gave him its name because he's a scientist. And so they landed there about 25 years ago, and they started studying the land, but after about 1 year of being on that island, all of the other botanists on the crew were completely eliminated, digested or eaten by the giant insects or the giant beetles or centipedes or myriapods on the island, and just devoured. And so Heraclean, I'm assuming the ship was also destroyed, or he just couldn't get back to it in time. The ship might have gotten destroyed, because what happens, how the Stomach Baron eat, and this is very disturbing, is you might notice these islands, they look like blooming flowers just on the ocean, right? It's highly possible, by the way, that they extend all the way down into the ocean floor, kind of like this. There's a German author by the name of Walter Moers, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but he has like a series of books that take place on this, I'm just gonna I have my notes here. Walter Moers, and he has this book series that takes place on a continent called Zamonia, and there's a plant in this land of Zamonia called the Gourmetica insularis, and it looks like this. And when I saw this, I'm like, all right, this looks remarkably similar to the BOIN Islands, like maybe how they were set up and everything. So it's very possible it works like that, like the stem reaches all the way down into the ocean floor, and then the flower buds are at the very top, right? Well, but anyway, the way that the islands devour their prey is that they lure them into the center of the island with the gluttony forest, and they entice them with, rich aromas and everything like that, and the entire island will literally just rise up like this and just enclose in completely, so there's no way they can escape, and it'll just kind of like undulate. And then at the very center of the island, that's the maw, that's the mouth of the island that opens up, and then all the food, all the animals and stuff just fall in. We saw that even sea kings and sea monsters from the ocean will be enticed by the aroma of all this deliciousness, and getting on the island is actually very easy. The plants and the insects will let you get onto the island and get further and further in, but trying to get back out is very difficult, okay? Because at the center of the island, that's where all that enticing food is, all right? So that gets you stuck there, but even if you have enough willpower to turn around and walk, try to run back to the shore, for one thing, the flower buds kind of rise up at the end, so there really isn't a beach. There's really not like a coastline to the island, okay? It's like a giant barrier that kind of prevents you, but even if you try to get to the edge of the island, it's going to be very difficult, because this is where a lot of the insects, the giant insects, kind of linger, because whenever the smaller insects or the smaller animals try to escape, they're going to run right into them, and so a lot of the insects just stay on the edge of the island waiting for other insects or other animals to, enter their domain and devour them there. So it was very difficult for Usopp, especially in his rather, his robust state, to manage to get off the island, okay? So yeah, with a situation like that, you make sense how maybe a lot of the botanists didn't make it. Heraclean probably was in despair for a little while there, but he was a survivalist. I mean, he pretty much had to be at that point. He had to go all castaway with this, and he just learned how to live on the island. He discovered the pop greens, which are the carnivorous plant's seeds, and he figured out a way to cultivate them, so when you fire off pop greens, they just explode in like a giant Venus flytrap monster or whatever, which is actually very similar to how the island like entices prey, just like the Venus flytrap. Do you guys know how a Venus flytrap operates? How it works? It's horrifying, but also fascinating, okay? So this is a Venus flytrap. I'm sure we're all at least aware of what it looks like, right? On the edge of its leaf, it's got like a nectar it emits from the side of it, like these little pores where nectar just kind of, appears around the edge of the plant. And so you'll have like a bee or a fly or something land on the perimeter of the Venus flytrap and just begin to suck up that nectar. Now, there are 3 hairs located inside of the Venus flytrap that like connect it like with electrical signals to close it whenever they strike. I think 2 of them. If like more than one of these hairs is struck within a time period of like less than 10 or 20 seconds, then within like the fraction of a second, it just and then those hairs at the end of the Venus flytrap, which are like modified leaves, will just close and then interlock, and then whatever bug you are, you just happen to be stuck. You can't get out, and then you're stuck like that until the bug slowly dies, and the Venus flytrap absorbs all the nutrients out of the dead, decaying carcass, and then after a certain number of days go by, when the plant has its fill, the trap will just reset and just open up again, and it's just the dried out, desiccated carcass will be inside. It'll just fall out. So yeah, that's how Venus flytraps work. Now, there are of course other plants out there, like butterworts, that use like that kind of like tactic of emitting a very sweet kind of nectar, and a insect will land on it and get stuck. I think in the case with the butterworts, it's like these little tiny hairs where I don't think the plant itself closes in, at least not to the extent the Venus flytrap does, but whenever a insect lands on that flower, it won't be able to move. It's like the little tiny, it's like Velcro. It's like little Velcro hairs that, the insects are stuck. Evolution is basically one massive battle between insects and plants. If you really look at it, it's just like insects trying to eat plants, plants trying to create some crazy new chemical to keep insects from eating it. Insects develop some immunity to that chemical, so they got to figure out another way to fight back. It's just a constant back and forth between insects and plants, man. That's what the freaking animal kingdom's all about. Or the plant kingdom, I guess. Whatever. Both. It's the same thing. Or it's all the tree of life, Alright. So, yeah, though, Heraclean, I can imagine at some point he just KO'd a giant beetle and, ripped off its exoskeleton and fashioned some cool armor, and he learned where all the different forests were on the island, and it's like where to go and where to avoid. But this guy's a boss. He still continued his research. He was still learning about all these different plants, and the reason I know this is because he could have left whenever he wanted. It's really hard to get off the island if you're just going to try to run to the shore, and even if you run to the shore, you don't have a boat. What are you going to do? Although there is a pop green that does create a banana boat, so just keep that in mind. I should do just a whole separate video on all the different pop greens we've seen so far, but yeah, there's a pop green that just creates a boat whenever you need it. But yeah, instead of just trying to run to the edge of the island and like maybe jumping off and swimming away, what you could do is just figure out a way to tame the giant flying beetles on the island, and then just, get off the island that way by just flying away. That's what Heraclean and Usoppin did when it was time for them to finally leave and go to Sabaody. They had these two giant beetles that they befriended, enough to the point where they let them ride on their backs and just, fly off. So that tells me, yeah, Heraclean, he probably tamed these beetles long before Usoppin got there. He probably could have just left the island whenever, but he's like, well, no, I came here to study plants, and dang nabbit, that's what I'm gonna do, and that's what he did, and he seemed like he was living the life. He didn't really seem like, he was worried about death at that point. He seemed pretty chill. He's just like, oh yeah, the island is gonna begin to, increase in, it's gonna go a little bit more acute here and try to absorb everything into its giant maw. So just got to avoid that, really, and you should be fine, Usoppin. So, yeah, but he's a great character. I just love that dude, alright? He's just trying to protect Usopp, and they become this great master and student. They have this relationship together. It's just great. I love it. Now, because I already talked about some carnivorous plants, I like to think that there's other forests of the island that exhibit similar traits to, like, the plants I discussed, like the butterworts, like with the little Velcro hairs. I'm sure there might be a forest like that where you enter it and it, like, literally, like, sticks to you. And even some plants can excrete some kind of nectar that's more of like a glue to literally keep the insects there. So there might be, like, a glue forest or a sticky forest, something like that prevents you from leaving, okay? It's just, the plants developed, every sort of tactic in order to lure prey into the island and then keep them there for whenever the giant, plant decides to devour it for its mid-afternoon lunch. All right, that's the whole point of it there. But yeah, I'm sad that we don't get to see as much of the islands as I would have liked. We only got those two forests, the Swindling Forest and the Gluttony Forest, when I'm sure there were a lot more. Now, there were other plants, there were other islands, but I'm sure they were pretty much all the same. They each had a Gluttony Forest, they each had a Swindling Forest, or a Glue Forest, or whatever they had in order to survive. It's just Usopp happened to land on that one. That's the BOIN Archipelago. Not really too much to go into, but a rather fascinating place. It's especially cool because you know, the Grand Line has so much different and such a wide variety of plant life, you know, and we get to see it every now and then when the Straw Hats go to a certain island and stuff, like, oh, there's this weird plant, or here's this weird type of fruit. But this was the place that really brought that up, is like, no, this is the island where the plants will, you know, try to eat you. They are like the top on the food chain, okay? So, yeah, have fun with that, buddy. So, yeah, it was cool that we got to see it, and it's cool that Heraclesen was now a great addition to the story, and I really hope Heraclesen shows up again. Like, I know Heraclesen showed up at Saboti to help Usopp get away with the giant beetles, like, you know, blocking the Marines and everything like that, but I hope he shows up one more time. I hope he shows up at the final battle for Raftel, and, you know, Usopp's on the ground, he's about to get beaten down, and all of a sudden a giant beetle flies overhead, and Heraclesen lands and does a cool epic pose, and then takes out like he has like a glaive or something he has, but it's like covered in like insect legs as like blades and stuff, and he's like, Usoppin, you must arisen, let's go in, and then they'd fight together through the freaking Marines and through like, I don't know, the Blackbeard pirates or whatever, just trying to get to the One Piece. They can do it, Usopp, they can do it. Also, you really think about it like this. What's Usopp's dream? Usopp's dream is to become a brave warrior of the sea, right? Following in the footsteps of his father, and in the footsteps of the great giants of Elbaf, and also in the footsteps of Heraclesen. Because Heraclesen, man, you could say whatever you want about him, but if you do not call him a brave warrior of the sea, you just better get the hell out of here, okay? You might as well just call him Heracles, because you don't deserve to put the N at the end. Actually, his name really just is Heracles. The N doesn't exist. That's just his weird, quirky thing that he says. But, you know, it's cool. Alright, well, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Say goodbye, Nathan, and alright, bye, everybody. Bye. Are you gonna kick me? Well, I guess we'll find out later, won't we, Nathan?